it light. We take the dark and make our sisters. Take the dark and for our lives. Love we stand together. We take the dark and make it light.
Hello, and welcome to Radio OPAC, a project of the Ohio Prison Arts Connection. Radio OPAC is a monthly show bringing you compelling conversations and performances featuring artists and individuals working in all kinds of spaces, both inside and outside of prisons. If you'd like to learn more, please visit www.ohioprisonartsconnection.org. My name is Jared Small, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to another edition of Radio OPAC with the episode entitled Music Breaks Barriers. Today's episode will feature music and composers who have overcome immense obstacles, withstood personal or professional conflict, challenged societal norms, or perhaps tested the status quo of what was generally accepted by the public during their time period. Through the centuries, music has been a balm for so many people in overcoming their own barriers or the barriers of others. We know that music and the arts on a broader scale can and do help us achieve the impossible, bring us together, and move us towards progress on personal and societal levels. Today's episode of Radio OPAC will feature 5 musicians who make up Alt 5 Winds. Alt 5 Winds is a Columbus, Ohio-based wind quintet dedicated to making music more accessible to Central Ohio audiences through innovative, captivating musical programming in typical and atypical settings. Alt 5 Winds consists of Shane Sprankle on flute, Dr. Melanie Richards on clarinet, Jamie Fox on French horn, and Leah Chamoose on the bassoon. Also me, Jared Small, on the oboe. Throughout today's episode, our performers will provide a few notes on each of the musical pieces you'll hear to assist you in learning more about the lives of composers and their pieces that were game changers in the musical world. While there is an abundance of music written for the traditional wind quintet dating back to the 18th century, the wind quintet musical repertoire today is still woefully unrepresentative of musicians and music admirers of all types and backgrounds. We're grateful to have an opportunity to share these pieces with you today in hopes of shedding some light on these compositions and composers while amplifying the need for continued work in removing barriers to make music and music careers more accessible for everyone. Before we turn to our performance, we'd like to make mention of the space that we're currently occupying. That is the North Broadway United Methodist Church located in Columbus, Ohio. Alt 5 Winds is so grateful for the generous ongoing support of North Broadway UMC through the use of its space and support from its amazing staff who work tirelessly to serve the community. It's my pleasure to introduce an individual who has been foundational to today's performance, Pastor Marcus Atha. Pastor Marcus is senior pastor at North Broadway UMC, and we asked him to share just a few words about the meaningfulness of today's episode. We invite you to listen to Pastor Marcus's words now.
I want to give you a word of thanks for inviting me to share with you in this capacity this afternoon. North Broadway United Methodist Church has been in partnership with the Alt 5 Winds group pretty much all during this pandemic. They've been practicing here in the sanctuary, and they've even played for us on a Sunday morning for some of our live stream services. So we are very thankful for that partnership. North Broadway United Methodist Church has had a long history with justice ministries in this city, around the country, and around the world. It's one of the things that people of this community really want to be involved with, and they give a lot of their energy to that. One of the justice ministries that we are a part of is Horizon Prison Ministry. They have their office here, and for many, many years, the folks in the congregation have been in connection with many of the prisons here in Ohio in various relationships. That has been a powerful statement of faith around that. Now, I want you to know that music and faith have the ability to bring a level of healing that transcends almost anything else. And when people are in difficulty, or when they are incarcerated, music and faith can really be helpful in their journey. Reverend Howard Thurman, a great writer, wrote about slavery and about difficulties in life when he said, "Folks can take everything away from you, but they cannot take your relationship with God and your faith and what music can do to your soul in the midst of healing. They can take away everything else. They can't take away that." And when you match up faith with music, it goes to a place in the soul that nobody else can get to. And in fact, music has a place to speak directly to the soul connected to healing that sometimes words, our spoken word, cannot do. It is music that does that. And that is why we share in these powerful ministries together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pastor Marcus, for your beautiful words and ongoing support of music and faith in all communities. And now, without further ado, we present our performance of Music Breaks Barriers. We'll begin with hearing just a few words from Alt 5 Winds flutist Shane Sprankle on our first piece, Umoja, by Valerie Coleman.
According to the Institute for Composer Diversity's analysis of 120 American orchestras' 2019 and 2020 plans, 94% of music programmed for that season's main stage orchestral concerts was written by white composers. This shows the need for greater diversity in classical music overall. Representation of music written by non-white and non-male composers is extremely lacking. Valerie Coleman is one voice whose growing success is breaking through this heavily one-sided programming. Coleman has been described as having a talent for delineating form and emotion with shifts between ingeniously varied instrumental combinations. The New York Times observes her compositions as skillfully wrought, buoyant music. Her creative style and thematic music have made its mark on the classical music world, giving representation to both Black and women composers. In addition to increasing cultural diversity within classical music, Valerie Coleman breaks boundaries as a collegiate educator and clinician. She is an assistant professor of performance, chamber music, and entrepreneurship at the Frost School of Music at the University of Miami. She promotes the concept of hybridity with her students, challenging them to explore and combine different disciplines of music and forge paths in their careers that are unique and diverse. Valerie Coleman was a founding member of Amani Winds who premiered this upcoming piece, Umoja. Umoja is Swahili for unity. Its uplifting energy and soaring themes make it a joy to play and hear. As one of Valerie Coleman's most popular pieces, it's a demonstration of how she is breaking barriers.
It's hard to believe in this day and age that there is little, if any, paper trail detailing Scott Joplin's life, but that is true. We don't know for sure when he was born, probably sometime in 1867, based on the 1870 census, and probably in northeast Texas. We do know that his father was formerly enslaved, and his mother was a free black woman from Kentucky. He was the second of 6 children and spent his childhood mostly in Texarkana. His mother worked for a white family there, and they would let young Scott practice on their piano. He would probably be considered a child prodigy today and quickly gained the attention of Julian Weiss, a local music teacher. Weiss gave him lessons for free and became an important musical mentor for Joplin throughout his life. He began touring throughout Missouri and to Chicago in his early 20s, first playing trumpet in a band and then as a pianist. He settled in Sedalia, Missouri for about 10 years, using it as his home base and taking music classes at the George R. Smith College, an institution designed for African Americans, to learn how to notate his own compositions. In 1899, at the age of 32, he published Maple Leaf Rag, which can change the trajectory of his entire life and the history of ragtime as we know it today. Maple Leaf sold more than 1 million copies. Joplin continued writing rags and other piano works, but he really wanted to see his opera Treemonisha performed. Unfortunately, it was not performed until 1972, when he also received a posthumous Pulitzer Prize in 1976 for it as well. Joplin became ill in 1917 with the effects of syphilis and died shortly thereafter at the age of 49. Solace, the Joplin piece we are playing for you today, was published in 1909. He wrote this piece and several others like it in an attempt to elevate ragtime music out of the bordellos and onto the concert stage. Joplin broke many barriers in his short life as an African-American composer, being dubbed the King of Ragtime. His music regained popularity in the 1970s when the movie The Sting came out, using many of Joplin's pieces in the Academy Award-winning soundtrack. His syncopated music set the stage for the blues and jazz, which came after ragtime in the 1920s and 30s.
In these next two pieces, Alt 5 Winds is pleased to perform selections by American composer William Grant Still. Born in Mississippi in 1895, he grew up in Little Rock, Arkansas, and attended Wilberforce University and the Oberlin Conservatory of Music, both here in Ohio. Due to Still's close association and collaboration with prominent African American literary and cultural figures, he is considered to have been part of the Harlem Renaissance and is referred to as the Dean of Afro-American Composers. Still lived to be 83 years old and died in Los Angeles in 1978.
William Grant Still's career consisted of many firsts. He was the first African American composer to have a symphony performed by a professional orchestra in the US, his Symphony No. 1, also known as the Afro-American Symphony. He also became the first African American to conduct a major symphony orchestra in the US when he led the Los Angeles Philharmonic in 1936. In the world of opera, his Troubled Island was the first by an African American to be performed by a major opera company, the New York City Opera, in 1949. And that same opera was the first by an African American to be nationally televised.
Still's legacy of firsts indicates a man who broke many barriers in the music world and within the larger context of society. He was a pioneer, but in a larger sense, he pioneered because he was able to create music capable of interesting the greatest conductors of the day. His musical style incorporates a variety of African American styles, from spirituals to blues and jazz, in addition to European, Latin American, and other folk music genres. Given African American composers of the early to mid 20th century were often confined to writing in the jazz and blues styles, Still broke ground in infusing other elemental styles to create compositions that were uniquely his own.
You'll hear Still's penchant for incorporating these various styles and traditions in our next selections. Please enjoy our performance of two separate pieces by William Grant Still, both arranged for wind quintet at a later date. The first of which are two movements from his miniatures, followed by one movement from his folk suite No. 4.
Classical music often has a reputation for being stuffy and very serious. This simply is not true. There's much humor and joy along with the seriousness and drama of classical music. My first experience to classical music came from Bugs Bunny cartoons. The background music was played by an orchestra and was written to express the antics and emotions of the characters. The scores were very often a mixture of original music and quotes from famous orchestral pieces. I didn't realize some of the music was famous until later in life when I began playing the bassoon and studying classical music. Through watching cartoons, I learned to listen to classical music in a light, humorous way. Arne Running was a contemporary American composer and clarinetist who lived from 1943 to 2016. He wrote this two-movement piece, aria and quodlibet, for woodwind quintet. We'll only be playing the quodlibet today, but Mr. Running shows his sense of humor by pairing the beautiful, slow, soulful aria movement with the quodlibet. Quodlibet is defined as a humorous musical parody of well-known melodies. He must have enjoyed cartoons as much as I did. He did a masterful comical mashup of some of the most famous orchestral solos ever written for each of our instruments. You'll recognize many of these musical snippets from cartoons, commercials, hold music, and even elevator music. Please allow yourselves to laugh out loud as we follow Mr. Running's musical instructions to boogie woogie and loony toony our way through the quodlibet.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Radio OPAC. We hope you enjoyed our showcase of music and composers who broke barriers and changed the way we look and engage with music. If you'd like to learn more about today's performing group, Alt 5 Wins, we invite you to visit our Facebook and YouTube pages by searching Alt 5 Wins on those social media platforms. Today's episode of Radio OPAC would not have been possible without the support of several individuals for whom we'd like to express our dearest thanks. Thank you again to the entire staff and parish of North Broadway United Methodist Church for being our hosts today and for your continued support of Alt 5 Wins as a tireless advocate in the community. We'd also like to thank Alt 5 Wins tireless advocate John Haight, who assisted with today's myriad technical production elements. Finally, we thank you, our audience, and we look forward to seeing you for another episode of Radio OPAC. See you next time and be well.
I believe somehow we're gonna make it now. Dreams of hate are turning into dreams of love. We're turning hate to love. I believe we know we have to let the love light show. Oh yeah, yes. I believe somehow we're gonna make it now. You and I must overcome what keeps us torn apart, because the road to unity is not that far away. Everybody is the same. From the mind of God we came. We have got the power to be one. I believe somehow we're gonna make it now. Dreams of hate are turning into dreams of love. We're turning hate to love. I believe we know that your love light show. Yeah, yes. I believe somehow we're gonna make it now. Every day